Hey folks, Brenton Lengel here, and I've got one question for you. What the heck is a Buddha? Now, here's where we could cue to my intro, and it could be like cool jangly guitar music and maybe some crazy graphics and everything. Um, but I figured I'd just approach people here as opposed to going into a bunch of different cuts for like comedic effect. So sorry, I don't have the high production values. But what I do have actually is a wealth of experience on this particular subject. So the thing is, I'm not like a monk or a scholar or anything in this sense, but I am a practicing Buddhist. And there's been a lot of people in my channel, in my comments, that have been interested in my Buddhist philosophy and what I mean when I say I'm a Buddhist. And so I thought I'd do a video on just like what is a Buddha? Like, what is this ideal that we're all reaching for? Like, I assume everyone's heard the story about Shakyamuni Buddha. If not, there's like a million retellings across the internet. That's not really what I'm going to be talking about. What I'm going to be talking about is what is a Buddha and how does it relate directly to your life right now and why you should care. Because it's very easy for, with like sort of the mysticization of Buddha and the sort of lack of proper translation between Eastern terms and Western terms, that oftentimes people get confused over who Buddha was, both in the terms of Shakyamuni Buddha and what a Buddha is, and how does the Buddha affect your life right now as you are. Um, so to start things off, also keep in mind, while I am talking about religion. Buddhism is somewhat unique in that it is almost more of a philosophy than a religion, and I am not trying to convert anyone. The fact of the matter is that religion is very personal, and what I'm doing here is more on the end of educational content, as opposed to trying to preach to you something or convince you of something. So, if you're looking to be witnessed to by a Buddhist, I suppose go find somebody else, because that's not really how I do this. And you'll also notice that that's not how most Buddhists function, because as I said, Buddhism as a religion is very unique in the sense of world religion. So to begin, what the heck is a Buddha? Like, is this a Buddha? It's a jade figurine I got right here. What about this? Now, this one in particular, both of these are very important to me, both of these two figurines. This one was given to me by my mother. In fact, they were both given to me by my mother. This was given to me after a particularly awful breakup with like the first girl I ever loved. And my mom she could really tell that I was hurting, and she sent me Budai here, because he's the happy Buddha, the laughing Buddha. And she wanted me to, kind of pull out of the funk that I was in after having my heart broken into 1,000,000,000 pieces my first year of college. And this was actually my mother's Buddha, which was given to her via a cultural exchange program when she was a girl. And as a child, as a very little kid, I used to play with him. Budai here, you rub his belly for good luck, and you'll find depictions of this Buddha in a number of like Chinese restaurants and stuff. Um, Budai is actually a figure from Chinese mythology, and he is a Buddhist monk, but also like a deity in China, like a demigod. And so, is he a Buddha? Possibly. He was. I mean, technically, yes, and you'll see why as I go further. But um, he was attributed with Maitreya, and I probably mangled that pronunciation, the Buddha of the future, because spoiler, there is more than one Buddha. Buddha is not a person. Buddha is a title. It literally means enlightened one. And Shakyamuni Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who was the prince that we talked about, who lived around 2,500 years ago, he specifically was the first recorded Buddha in history. But the fact is that there were many Buddhas before him, and there will be many Buddhas after him. Because, again, Buddha is a status of attainment. It is a title. It is not a person. So, because also, I came up and I wanted to pull this out also. Here is another Buddha. This is a depiction of Buddha. You might see them more often in Southeast Asia as opposed to China. And you can see that this statue of the Buddha, this tiny Buddha head, this has a Greek influence on it. Because these depictions of the Buddha, and this is supposed to be Siddhartha Gautama, came, as a result of the artists and artisans of the area being influenced by these sculptors of the ancient Greeks. So is this a Buddha? Well, it's a picture, like it's a sculpture of someone's idea of what the Buddha looked like, based upon other people's ideas that were then brought into existence. And this is actually really big because, like, as I said, my experience, beyond like being an artist and kind of a counterculture guy, writer, sometimes philosopher, I was very, very active in Soka Gakkai. I still am. Soka Gakkai is the largest, it's the largest lay Buddhist organization in the world. We're a Japanese sect of Nichiren Buddhists, and we do a lot of work with the UN. And in Harlem, I was, until I aged out, a YMD leader within Soka Gakkai. So, I was kind of the guy who was always going and reading all the sutras and stuff. And I had studied Buddhism in college, so I had a basis to pull from. And that's sort of where I'm going to be talking to you from. Because, when I was younger, I was always really interested in Buddhism. And I asked my mom, very young, I was sort of indoctrinated to be a little heathen, which I'm very happy about. Not just because I got to play with a cool Buddha sculpture, but also, I remember my mom, the first time she's reading me Bible stories, as a kid, just like as a bedtime story. And she read to me the story of Abraham and Isaac. And those of you who are Christian will remember this is the story where God tries to get a parent to murder their child for him. And you got to imagine my mom reading this story to her children. She literally gets to the end of the story and she's just like, I think that's an absolutely awful way to test someone. Like, how in the world could God do that? And I was sitting there like, just kind of blown away, floored by this whole thing. And that really sat with me. And I remember even when I was, I was raised Catholic, and it was always very important that we go to church, particularly like on Easter and stuff. And I remember one Easter Sunday, my mom just took me out and she said, instead of going to church, we're going to sit here and we're going to see life developing in spring, and we're going to see the rebirth of the flowers in the garden and stuff. And so, I've always had a very different way of looking at religion and than your average person. So, and I've talked a little bit about my process with coming to be a practicing Buddhist, but when I was younger, I was very much influenced by a Western pop culture idea of what Buddhism was. And so, I sort of had this idea that a Buddha was a supernatural being, that a person could become this supernatural being if they, went off and meditated on a mountain until eventually they, dissolved into light and popped out into the universe and went around, I don't know, flying around doing cool superhero stuff, which is not an uncommon impression, especially when you're approaching Buddhism from a Western perspective, because of course, Westerners, the closest thing that we have to the Buddha is our image of God the Father or Jesus Christ. And neither of these images really cover what a Buddha is. Because Buddhas are in a lot of ways, especially in Hindu and Buddhist mythology, these are figures that are greater than the gods. The gods have, the gods and the angels and all that stuff, they have all of this great power. and they tend to, like it within the mythology, they tend to have very, very long lives, and they tend to be good lives, but ultimately that is a temporary state that will fall apart. And a god or a deva cannot become a Buddha. Only a human can become a Buddha, because gods and devas are just too happy to really gain the kind of drive that's needed to see through the illusion of the world. You know, to see through the illusion to the real reality that underlies everything that we're looking at. Because that's really what Buddhism as a practice is about. It is about seeing through illusions, seeing through Maya. And in fact, this is kind of a brutal part of the story. But when Buddha was born, his life, this is Siddhartha Gautama, his life symbolically was hit with a major, what seems to be a major tragedy, in that his mother, Maya, died in childbirth with him, which is incredibly sad. I can't imagine him, growing up like that. But also symbolically, if we look at that, Maya is also the Buddhist word for illusion. So in a symbolic way of reading that is that as the Buddha came into the world, illusion was dispelled. The great Maya being like the illusory power of Brahma. Brahma being the Godhead, being the dreamer that creates this entire world around us, and that we are all Brahma, is sort of the Hindu view of things. We're all aspects of Brahma. And that's getting into what undergirds this, but what I wanted to talk to you about right now specifically is what is a Buddha and how does this apply to your own life? And to do this, I'm going to use 2 readings, 2 quotes, and 2 stories. So to start off with, I'm going to give you 2 quotes, and these are 2 incredibly contrasting quotes. And if they seem to directly contradict each other, that's fine, because Buddhism is a practice, and Buddhist thought often takes the form of a dialectic. So if you go up and you ask a Zen master, to teach you what is a Buddha, to fix you, to help you reach some spiritual enlightenment, he's just going to troll the crap out of you for a while, and he will be helping you. But the point is that you don't ever really want to take any Buddhist scripture directly at face value. It's about the overall conversation, not about the individual little bits that are said. So to begin, this first quote comes from Daisaku Ikeda. Now, Daisaku Ikeda is the current president of Soka Gakkai, and he's a figure that is immensely inspiring to me and to hundreds of thousands of other people around the world. So, according to Daisaku Ikeda, Buddhahood is the joy of joys. Birth, old age, illness, and death are no longer suffering, but part of the joy of life. The light of wisdom illuminates the entire universe, casting back the innate darkness of life. The life space of the Buddha becomes united and fused with the universe. The self becomes the cosmos, and in a single instant, the life flow stretches out to encompass all that is past and all that is future. In each moment of the present, the eternal life force of the cosmos pours forth as a gigantic fountain of energy. So that's Daisaku Ikeda talking about what Buddhahood is. Now we're going to get into another thinker. This is Bodhidharma speaking about Buddhahood. Bodhidharma is he's a Zen figure. He is a semi-mythical figure within Buddhist cosmology and history. If you attain anything at all, it's conditional. It's karmic. It results in retribution. It turns the wheel. As long as you're subject to birth and death, you will never attain enlightenment. To attain enlightenment, you have to see your nature. Unless you see your nature, all this talk about cause and effect is nonsense. Buddhas don't practice nonsense. To say he attains anything at all is to slander a Buddha. What could he possibly attain? Even focusing on a mind, a power, an understanding, or a view is impossible for a Buddha. A Buddha isn't one-sided. The nature of his mind is basically empty, neither pure nor impure. He is free of practice and realization. He is free of cause and effect. The Buddha in the mind is like a fragrance in a tree. The Buddha comes from a mind free of suffering, just as a fragrance comes from a tree free of decay. There's no fragrance without a tree. There is no Buddha without the mind. If there's a fragrance without a tree, it's a different fragrance. If there's a Buddha without your mind, it is a different Buddha. The sutras of the Buddha contain countless metaphors, because mortals have shallow minds and don't understand anything deep. The Buddha used the tangible to represent the sublime. People who seek blessings by concentrating on external works instead of internal cultivation are attempting the impossible. So those are my first two quotes, and they seem to almost be in direct contrast. You see the great hopeful, amazing nature of the Buddha as described by Daisaku Ikeda, and you also see this kind of almost, annoyed, haggard explanation, trying to get through to these people of exactly what the Buddha is. And Bodhidharma supposedly brought Buddhism from India to China, and he was teaching monks. And he was teaching people that were kind of instilled in Confucian and Taoist patterns of thinking. And also he was talking to, people much further back in time than Daisaku Ikeda was writing to a modern audience. So he had to be very careful with how he spoke, because these were people that had very the supernatural was much more a part of their actual world. So you can see the frustration of Bodhidharma as he cuts through all of this, kind of airy nonsense about attaining Buddhahood, and kind of smashes that idea that I had that a Buddha was a supernatural being that a human could turn into if they thought long or hard enough about it. Now, both of those are correct. And again, they seem to be contrasting, but it's, as Bodhidharma says, a Buddha isn't one-sided. The nature of their minds are neither pure nor impure. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's get into the next two readings. And these come in part from the liturgy. This is, I actually chant this daily in Japanese. And I'm glad that I chanted in Japanese because I don't understand Japanese. And so the syllables and the words themselves, it actually does more for you if you don't understand exactly what you're saying when you're saying it, if that makes sense. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go further. But I'm going to be reading, and I'm not going to chant to you in Japanese. I'm going to be reading you the English translation because, it's right in here. I remember my local young men's leader, when he brought this to me, they changed the prayers slightly, and I'm like, whoa, they changed the prayers? And he's like, yeah, we worship Satan now. And then we both laughed for about 5 minutes straight. So anyway, what I have here in the liturgy, this is a slight passage. The first one comes from the second chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the Expedient Means chapter, which is one of the two most important chapters within that sutra. And this is where Buddha himself, Shakyamuni Buddha, in his final teaching, is describing a Buddha. So I'm going to give it to you right now. The wisdom of the Buddhas is infinitely profound and immeasurable. The door to this wisdom is difficult to understand and difficult to enter. Not one of the voice hearers or Pratyeka Buddhas, that's the private Buddhas, is able to comprehend it. What is the reason for this? The Buddhas have personally attended 100, 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000, a countless number of Buddhas, and have fully carried out an immeasurable number of Buddha's ways and doctrines. They have exerted themselves bravely and vigorously, and their names are universally known. They have realized the law that is profound and never known before, and preach it in accordance with what is appropriate, yet their intentions are difficult to understand. Shariputra, ever since I attained Buddhahood, I have through various causes and various similes widely expounded my teachings, and have used countless expedient means to guide living beings and cause them to renounce their attachments. Why is this? Because the thus come ones are fully possessed of both expedient means and the paramita of wisdom. Shariputra, the wisdom of the thus come ones is expansive and profound. They have immeasurable compassion, unlimited eloquence, power, fearlessness, concentration, emancipation, and samadhis. Samadhis being the ability to meditate very deeply, and have deeply entered the boundless and awakened law never before attained. Shariputra, the thus come ones know how to make various distinctions and to expound the teachings skillfully. Their words are soft and gentle and can delight the hearts of the assembly. To sum it up, the Buddhas have fully realized the law that is limitless, boundless, and never attained before. But stop, Shariputra. I will say no more. Why? Because what the Buddhas have achieved is the rarest and most difficult to understand law. The true aspect of all phenomena can only be understood and shared between Buddhas. So that's the first excerpt from what I chant daily, which is Gangyo. Now, Shariputra, by the way, if anybody was wondering, that is a famous disciple of the Buddha, and he tends to be depicted either as like kind of the smartest apple polishing guy in the room, or at times a total idiot, because they need someone to ask stupid questions so Buddha can answer them in the various sutras, or to take issue with stuff. But what he's talking about there is he's essentially describing the Buddha, and you see a lot of what both Bodhidharma and Daisaku Ikeda were talking about there. Specifically, you see that the Buddhas are on a whole nother level in how they experience the world compared to your average human. Even humans of high attainment, like the voice hearers and the Pratyeka Buddhas, being the private Buddhas and the people that are seeking from religious masters. In fact, look back at my 10 Worlds video if you want to understand like what they're referring to right there. But let's stay focused on this. Let's stay focused on the Buddha and what the Buddha is. Now, we get into the second reading here, and this one's really key. This comes from the 16th chapter, the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, and this is referred to often as the beating heart of Mahayana Buddhism. Since I attained Buddhahood, the number of kalpas, kalpa being a very long time, that have passed is an immeasurable, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions, trillions, ashmakyas. Constantly I have preached the law, teaching, converting countless millions of living beings and causing them to enter the Buddha way. All this for immeasurable kalpas, in order to save living beings. As an expedient means, I appear to enter nirvana, but in truth I do not pass into extinction. I am always here, preaching the law. I am always here, but through my transcendental powers I make it so that living beings in their befuddlement do not see me even when close by. When the multitude sees that I have passed into extinction, far and wide they offer alms to my relics. All harbor thoughts of yearning, and in their minds thirst to gaze at me. When living beings have become truly faithful, honest and upright, gentle in intent, single-mindedly desiring to see the Buddha, not hesitating even if it costs them their lives, then I and the assembled monks appear together on Holy Eagle Peak. At that time I tell the living beings that I am always here, never entering in extinction, but that because of the power of expedient means, at times I appear to be extinct, and at other times not. And if there are living beings in other lands who are reverent and sincere in their wish to believe, then among them too I will preach the unsurpassed law. But you have not heard this, and so you suppose that I enter extinction. When I look at living beings, I see them drowned in a sea of suffering, and therefore I do not show myself, causing them to thirst for me. When their minds are filled with yearning, at last I appear and preach the law for them. Such are my transcendental powers. For asmakya kalpas, constantly I have dwelled on Holy Eagle Peak and in various other places. When living beings witness the end of a kalpa, and all is consumed in a great fire, this, my land, remains safe and tranquil. constantly filled with heavenly and human beings. The halls and pavilions in its gardens and groves are adorned with various kinds of gems. Jeweled trees abound in flowers and fruit, where the living beings enjoy themselves at ease. The gods strike heavenly drums, constantly making many kinds of music. Mandarava blossoms rain down, scattering over the Buddha in the great assembly. My pure land is not destroyed. Yet the multitude see it as consumed in fire, with anxiety, fear, and other sufferings filling it everywhere. These living beings, with their various offenses, through causing and arising from their evil actions, spend unknown kalpas, without hearing the name of the three treasures. But those who practice meritorious ways, who are gentle, peaceful, honest, and upright, all of them will see me here in person, preaching the law. At times for this multitude I describe the Buddha's lifespan as immeasurable, and to those who see the Buddha only after a long time, I explain how difficult it is to meet a Buddha. Such is the power of my wisdom that its sagacious beams shine without measure. This lifespan of countless kalpas I gained as a result of lengthy practice. You who are possessed of wisdom entertain no doubts beyond this point. Cast them off, end them forever, for the Buddha's words are true and not false. He is like a skilled physician who uses expedient means to cure his deranged sons. Though in fact alive, he gives out word that he is dead, yet no one can say that he speaks falsely. I am the father of this world, saving those who are suffered and afflicted. Because of the befuddlement of ordinary people, though I live, I give out word that I have entered extinction. For if they see me constantly, arrogance and selfishness arise in their minds. Abandoning restraint, they give themselves up to the 5 desires and fall into the evil paths of existence. Always I am aware of which living beings practice the way and which do not, and in response to their needs for salvation, I preach various doctrines for them. At all times I think to myself, how can I cause living beings to gain entry to the unsurpassed way and quickly attain the body of a Buddha? All of this is a Buddha's work, which I have never for an instant neglected. Now, what the heck was that? So, first off, when he talks about extinction, the Buddha's actually talking about nirvana. And whoop, wearing my nirvana t-shirt for this one. A lot of people don't really understand what nirvana is. It's described often as a cooling. It's called, like, it's compared to blowing out of a flame. And people who come and think of it from a more Hindu perspective, but also from a Western perspective, where we have ideas like the immortal soul and heaven, come to this idea that essentially nirvana is this realm somewhere else, or that it is an extinction that we enter into. And you can't blame them because, it says extinction. But that's not actually the proper translation of the word. Nirvana means blow out, as in exhale. Because what happens when you try to hold your breath, when you breathe? And in fact, this actually happened while I was getting ready. I was getting ready to do this. I didn't want to intake of my breath as I started on the microphone. So I went, and I started to get everything together. I didn't have it together. And I was like, because what happens when you hold on to your breath, when you cling to it, is pain comes. You suffer. You suffer because you desire, because you cling to the stuff of life, literally to the breath of life. I won't let the breath of life leave my lungs. And that is going to first hurt me and eventually will kill me if I don't blow out and take another breath in. This is really, really important in like so many aspects of your life. And you don't have to be a Buddhist to see how important it is to give up on attachments. Not to not desire things at all, because again, like if you try to give up desire entirely, you find that you're desiring to stop desiring. And this is one of the first lessons that people learn, because again, Buddhism is a dialectic. So, when you go to the Four Noble Truths, the first, it says the the cause of suffering is desire, and to cease suffering, you must cease desiring, and therefore you must follow the Noble Eightfold Path. And I should do something on the Four Noble Truths, though I don't find them as fascinating as I do some of the other aspects of Buddhist philosophy. Because the Four Noble Truths, as wonderful as they are like Buddhism. If this is Buddhism 101, they're like Buddhism for babies. And it was intended like that. A very quick primer on like what it is. But essentially, what's important is that we all are going to die. Like, I hate to say that, but it's the truth. You are never leaving this world alive, and neither am I, and neither is anyone. So if we try to cling to our life, if we try to cling to loved ones and accomplishments and physical things and to our own body and our own sanity, all of that stuff we are going to lose. And the knowledge that we are going to lose that if we cling to it, it's like, as Alan Watts said, is that mankind's curse is that we are the thinking animal. We're the animal who can project into the future and realizes, oh my God, I'm going to die. And we wince before we feel the bite of the crocodile. We die 1,000 deaths before we actually die. And we are swallowed up by anxiety surrounding disease before the disease even begins its feast, on our bodies. So part of the way to overcome this inherent problem of being a living being with a finite lifespan that knows it's going to die is to realize not to cling to it, not to cling to ourselves right now in this moment, not to cling to ourselves in the past, not to cling to anything, because the one universal constant is change, and there is nothing anyone can do about that. And so, blow out and realize that, what we're faced with is not actually as bleak as it seems. And in fact, the bleakness that some of you may be imagining is a product of coming from a Western background where we believe in the self, where we believe the ego is a real thing, where we believe there is an immortal soul that is part of some divine plan that, depending upon what you do here, will either be punished for eternity or, be raised up to heaven to take part in a never-ending church service for all of eternity, which sounds slightly worse than hell, now that I think about it. So, what I wanted to get out of that is to segue into our next two stories. But what was really important before I talked about that is the end of a kalpa and everything being consumed in a great fire, and that the Buddha's land remains safe and tranquil. Now, this goes back to Hindu mythology, and the idea is that Brahma, the Godhead, the everything in the universe, the deep down stuff that there is, Brahma essentially sleeps. And as Brahma sleeps, we are all the dreams of Brahma, incarnating and reincarnating into literally everything, from the rocks, from the grass, the deer, me, the internet. Everything is Brahma sleeping. We are God pretending he's not. Because, of course, when you're God, things get pretty boring, I would imagine. If you had no challenges and could do literally anything, what would you do with your immense power? You would find a way to limit yourself and go through that. And Alan Watts does some amazing lectures about this. So in Hindu mythology, there are 4 kinds of kalpas. There's it goes long to short. The longest kalpa is kind of a Garden of Eden sort of kalpa. The second kalpa that follows that one, the second period of dreaming, is one where things are mostly good, but evil starts to work its way in. The third kalpa is a time when the forces of evil and good are directly balanced. And the fourth kalpa is the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga is the shortest kalpa, and it is the one where evil wins, and everything is destroyed and consumed in a great fire, and Brahma wakes up and realizes, oh, that was a great dream. I had a blast, and goes on being Brahma for a little while, and then eventually goes back to sleep. This is the tradition that Buddhism came out of, keep in mind, that gave birth to all of the Hindu ideas about gods and goddesses and the caste system, and a lot of which the Buddhism is a direct reaction against. So it's important to kind of understand that when you're talking about the sutras, that when the Kali Yuga happens, and by the way, spoiler, according to Hindus, we're living in the Kali Yuga right now, and it's like right about time for Brahma to wake up, which I don't know if you've looked out the window lately, but with regard to COVID and Trump and murder hornets and global warming, yeah, it's looking a lot like the Kali Yuga. But this is what's important here. This, my land, remains safe and tranquil, though the multitude see it destroyed within a great fire. Now, there's a lot of meanings with there. There's the historical Hindu meaning that the Buddha land somehow survives the Kali Yuga. It somehow survives the awakening of Brahma. How in the heck is that possible? Well, we're going to talk about that in the sense that it goes into what a Buddha actually is, and how a Buddha functions within the world, within this cosmology, both the Hindu cosmology that I just described, and also the Christian cosmology, and not just that, but the Western secular cosmology of, us being the lone individual that was fluked into existence and will live out a brief existence between cradle and grave, and then will be heard no more. Who struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. I'm paraphrasing Hamlet there. The thing is that this applies to everything. And this is one of the unique things about Buddhism, because Buddhism is a religion you can practice alongside other religions, and if you have no religion whatsoever, you can still practice Buddhism and it can still have a positive impact on your life. Because the Buddha, again, means awakened one. The Buddha is the man who woke up, who saw through the illusion, through the Maya of Brahma. The Maya being the magical power of Brahma, the saw through the rocks and the trees and the generated world that is around us, to the true nature of reality. Essentially, Buddha is the guy, it's the title for someone, male, female, or whatever, who figures out the game and realizes that what we are faced with is not something serious, but something that is essentially playful. And playful, I mean in the sense that music is playful. Because again, if we are the dream of Brahma, if we are the dreaming Godhead, essentially, well, what we really are is not ourselves. We're a piece of Brahma. And we aren't just a piece of Brahma, because Brahma doesn't stop. Brahma is literally everything. And so we are literally everything. And this is described within the Lotus Sutra. Now, there are two key stories within the Lotus Sutra. And these are the last two things that I'll bring up here to explain this. The first of which involves the story of a monk who is about to go on a great journey. And he and his friends get together for one last drink before he goes on his journey around the world. And so they sit down and they drink sake all night, and the monk gets super drunk and passes out. Now his friends, knowing that he's going to be faced with a number of challenges, what they do is they sew a hugely precious jewel into his robes. And they sew it up so, he can't lose it or whatnot, and they intend to tell him in the morning. But then they get drunk and pass out. And the monk wakes up the next day, looks around, sees his friends sleeping, and can't bear to speak to them again because he's going to go on this journey. And so he leaves to let them sleep, wearing the robe, not knowing about the jewel tucked into the interior of the robe. And so the monk goes through, and horrible things happen to him on this journey. He's robbed, he's beaten, he becomes homeless for a period of time. Every single misfortune that could possibly fall upon a person falls on this monk's shoulders. And finally he struggles and meets his friends again in like the marketplace, and he's sitting there begging. And they are like, "Oh my God, like, Ted?" Ted, the monk. Is that you? And he's like, "Yeah." And they're like, what the hell happened? And he's like, "Oh my God, you guys don't even want to know. I mean, this and then this and then this. And I'm sitting here in the marketplace and I'm completely destitute and I have no idea what to do." And the friend stops and says, "Ted, look in your robe." And the whole time he had the same robe on. And he looks inside, and there's the jewel. It's the answer to all of his problems right now. Now, that story, and I think that's a fun kind of almost O. Henry story, but it really kind of, and his name is not really Ted, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. I just made that up right now. Brilliant writer, naming the monk Ted. But you see what the story is trying to get across. And to really fully understand what the story is trying to get across, what we have to do is we have to look into, I believe it's the 7th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. And this is the Treasure Tower chapter. So in this, the Lotus Sutra in general is held by Mahayana Buddhists to be the final teaching of Siddhartha Gautama before he died. It could not have been written by Siddhartha Gautama, but none of the sutras were actually written by the authors that they are attributed to. And in fact, every sutra begins with, "This is what I heard." These are oral traditions that were passed down and then later written down. So this sutra is not contemporary to the Buddha, but again, from a Buddhist perspective, that doesn't actually matter. What matters is, and you'll see in a second why it doesn't matter, whether or not the historical man known as Siddhartha Gautama actually sat down and said or wrote this story, or if it came afterwards. So in this story, the Buddha gathers Shariputra, his sort of number one disciple, and all of his other disciples, and all of the Buddhas that ever were and ever will be, and also, because Buddhists view time as an illusion, which is consistent with a lot of modern like astrophysics. He gathers them all together, along with all these various figures from Japanese and Hindu mythology, and proceeds to preach a sermon for them. And as he's preaching this sermon, right before he starts, he raises up his hands, and out of the earth we see emerge a giant treasure tower. This treasure tower, it's a huge tower made of like emeralds and rubies and sapphires, all the different kinds of gems and pearls. And he opens the door to this tower, and inside the treasure tower is the Buddha who was Buddha before Shakyamuni. And the two of them come together, and the Buddha raises his arms, and this giant treasure tower that just emerged out of the earth, just imagine that happening out of nowhere. That treasure tower takes flight, and it rises into the air, and with it, everyone, the assembled multitude of all the monks and all the sages and all the figures from Japanese and Hindu mythology, and dragons and all the Buddhas that ever were and ever would be. And from this vantage point, in the air, the Buddha preaches his final teaching. Now, Nichiren Daishonin, the monk, the 11th century monk who founded Nichiren Buddhism, who was uniquely focused on the Lotus Sutra for a number of very good reasons, because it's the best one. Nichiren Daishonin took this as a metaphor for the inherent Buddha nature within all of us. Think again of the jewel, the gem, inside the robe. Think of Brahma, the dreaming Godhead. and think of yourself living your life right now with all of your worries and bills and hang-ups and every bad thing that's ever happened to you and every good thing that's ever happened to you and every time you felt weary and every time you felt overjoyed, and realize that to a Buddhist and to yourself, that your true nature, seeing through the true nature of reality, you are the treasure tower. And that just as the Buddha did something so incredible and amazing and psychedelic, like that right there is your true nature of the thing inside you, that your true identity beyond your name and your occupation and the things that have happened to you, that the real you is something so amazing and glorious and incredible as a giant frickin' treasure tower ripping its way out of the earth and flying into the air out of nowhere. That is a Buddha emerging from the earth. And the fact of the matter is that we are all Buddhas. We are all the treasure tower. And if we go back again to the liturgy, that is the law of the Lotus Sutra that the Buddha is alluding to. And that's why it's hard to understand, because that's not how conscious beings see the universe. We don't actually understand that what we are is not ourselves, not our ego. We are everything. We are the dream of Brahma, and we are Brahma at the same time, every single one of us. That consciousness itself is, or perhaps not consciousness, but existence itself is the fundamental light. And Alan Watts described it as, it's as if you had a light that's covered with a black ball, and in that ball were pinholes, and each pinhole is an aperture through which the light comes out. The darkness, the fundamental darkness of existence, is the tendency for conscious beings to forget this and to think that we are real and that we are ourselves and nothing else, and that our true personhood ends where our skin ends, and that this world around us is an alien place that we're dropped into, when in fact we are a fundamental part of this world, of this universe. As I always say it wrong, but you're it, essentially. Tatvan Asi? They'll probably figure it out. You and me and the mailman and the dog next door and the mailbox and the gravel in the road, all of us are essentially the same being. And when you realize this, you realize that we never die. That we are that eternal thing that comes and goes and appears now as John Jones, now as Mary Smith, now as Betty Brown. So it goes forever and ever and ever. That is the cycle of existence. And when Bodhidharma speaks about how a Buddha is free of karma, and there is nothing for a Buddha to obtain, you can't attain anything. When you realize the actual truth of existence, you can't attain anything because you already have everything. You're already Brahma. So what is there to obtain? There's nothing. You've got it. And similarly, there's nothing that can actually hurt you. There's nothing that can kill you. There's nothing that can make you suffer other than you, other than the dream that you happen to find yourself in at a given time. And at any point within this dream, you have the capacity to wake up, to realize what's really going on. And when you do that, you obtain the state of Buddhahood that Daisaku Ikeda specifically talked about. And to go back to it, Buddhahood is the joy of joys. Birth, old age, illness, and death are no longer suffering, but a part of the joy of living. The light of wisdom illuminates the entire universe, casting back the innate darkness of life. The life space of the Buddha becomes united and fused with the universe. The self becomes the cosmos, and in a single instant, the life flow stretches out to encompass all that is past and all that is future. In each moment of the present, the eternal life force of the cosmos pours forth as a gigantic fountain of energy. This is what Bodhidharma is talking about. This is what Alan Watts is talking about. This is what Shakyamuni Buddha is talking about. The fact that what we are, each of us, individually, we are our own self-contained universe. Because no one sees the world in exactly the way that you do or I do. We are the universe experiencing itself in infinite variety, an infinite number of times over. And to be a Buddha, to be a person, to be the man who woke up, is to not just understand this fact on an intellectual level, as oh, that's a really interesting theory, or that's an interesting, but to viscerally understand, to feel it, to know it in your heart. And through lengthy practice sometimes, or also sometimes for reasons no one can understand at all, because the Buddha nature is inherent to each of us. It is not something that has to be earned or given to you. It is not something that can be destroyed. You cannot lose it. You cannot break it. It is the fundamental nature of who you are. In Soka Gakkai and in lots of Nichiren sects, like if you look on the thing, this is the symbol of a lotus flower. And there's a lot of important lotus symbolism in Buddhism. But one of the biggest ones is to remember that the lotus flower is a very beautiful flower that blooms and opens in the sunlight, and it grows exclusively in dark, dank, muddy water. And so when you look at the lotus, you think, is the lotus the true nature of the lotus? Is it the flower? Or is it the roots and the mud? The fact is that the lotus is both simultaneously. And what do you want to focus on? And the practice of Buddhism is like the sunlight coming in and hitting that lotus flower and causing it to blossom. The practice of Buddhism doesn't turn you into something else. It doesn't give you supernatural powers. What it does is it helps you to realize what you were all along. And that's why you'll hear quotes like, if you see the Buddha, you should kill the Buddha, because it's not the Buddha. That's why members of Soka Gakkai and other Nichiren Buddhist sects actually have a lot of problems with idols of the Buddha. Because, again, this is not the Buddha. This is not my Buddha nature here. This is someone else's idea of a mythical figure that is associated with the Buddha. And while I love having this guy around, he means a lot to me. This is not, if I sit here and I say to myself, this is the Buddha, or if you sit there and you say to yourself, Siddhartha Gautama, that's the Buddha. Or if you think to yourself, no, it's this Buddhist figure or that Buddhist figure, that's the Buddha. You're looking everywhere but where it is. What's important is look into your robe. Look inward and realize, and once you look inward, you have to also remember you must look outward simultaneously. It is not something that can be found within any individual, and it's not something that can be found within everything, but within both the individual and everything. That is the essence of the Buddha. That is enlightenment. And that is what Buddhists who practice, like myself, are striving to attain. We're not trying to disengage from the world. We're not trying to love our loved ones less. Not clinging is not to cut yourself off from life. It is to live life vigorously and to pursue happiness for yourself and those around you, but to also see through the game. And that's what a bodhisattva is. The bodhisattva is the person who sees through the game, but the Buddha who returns keeps playing it. And why? Because other people haven't seen through the game quite yet. So that is what a Buddha is. And to close on the final quote, all of this is a Buddha's work that I have never for an instant stopped. That was mangled. But you know what? I'm going to end it at that. Wabi sabi. The single flaw in the Great Katana is the reason why it has all of its aesthetic value. Thank you guys so much. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to see more videos like this, please tell me in the comments. I'll go into more aspects of Buddhist philosophy and how Buddhist philosophy can work for you. All right? So, from me to you, this is Brenton Lengel signing off. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo.